Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dad, Bods, and Beards podcast. We have got an insanely special one for you guys today. It's also insanely special for us. This is a kind of a peak moment, but also a beginning of a massive trajectory for us. We have got Zachary Levi in the studio with us today, a remote studio, and we're going to get into talking about not just mental health and how that plays into Zach's life and everything he's doing, but just we're big on humanizing people because we're all the same at the end of the day, regardless of status, and where we're at in life. Everybody struggles with something in a different way. But before we get going, as always, this episode and every other one is brought to you by our sponsor, Mountain Ops. The best part about Mountain Ops is not just getting you the supplements you need to help you out with your physical health and mental health, but everything you buy on mountainops.com goes to help feed families in need. So use code DADBODS at checkout, get 20% off, and help out.
So, like I was telling...
I don't shut up.
No, not at all.
No. That's your job. You got to do that part.
He and I became friends 2 or 3 years ago. And now instantly became best friends. It was just clicked for us.
And
awkward for our wives. But I own a company called Copper Johns. It's a men's grooming company, and our logo, our motto is "Be proud of who you are." Mm-hmm. And so my whole motto is I'm going to bring you on our YouTube channel, and we're going to applaud you. We're going to root for you. You come tell us your story. And so I would interview people once a week, and I still do. And then Logan came on, and I'm like, dude, we got to have you on. After I met him, and people just loved us. And we're like, we got to have a reality show. We got to do something. And so we started Dad Bods, and we thought we were just going to have fun, and it
got heavy quick.
It got heavy because I was going through some things in my personal life that I'll share off screen, but not here.
Sure.
And he's going through something, and so it just kind of clicked, and all of a sudden we just realized that we love this.
There's a lot of guys that are struggling. I have a history of bipolar and struggle through a bunch of stuff. And I found that when you utilize the struggles more as a platform than a crutch, there's a lot of power in that. And there's a lot of relatability in that. There's a lot of, just people connecting. And so that's why when we were offered the chance to talk with you, we jumped on it. Not only just because, you're Zach Levi and we love Chuck, we love Shazam and all, my kids are massive Tangled fans.
You all have excellent taste.
Yeah.
Well, I will say this, not knowing I had depression at one point, like I still do, but I had severe depression to the point where my wife's like, you got to take care of this or I'm gone. And it was very scary for me. So I went in and I was watching Chuck a lot. No joke. It was come to find out, when you have that, you find something that you like and you bond to, and you continue doing it over and over and over because it's familiar and it's healthy. Yeah. That and Twilight.
Yeah. Okay. I've never seen Twilight, so I don't know. Maybe it has some healing properties.
It's the sparkling.
The follow-up question was going to be Team Edward or Team Jacob, but we'll forego that.
No, but yeah.
But yeah, so. Thanks for coming on.
Happy to.
Rambling
Happy
on
to be
and on.
here, yeah.
So for anybody who's lame and doesn't know who you are, can you give us just a quick intro? What's your...
Yeah, well, I mean, an actor, acting is kind of my bread and butter, has been my bread and butter for the last 25 years. When I was a little kid, I knew that I really do believe at around 3 or 4 years old, we all have our consciousness kind of comes online, our awareness does. Prior to that, you're alive, obviously, and you're giggling and pooping and bouncing around and whatever, but...
I get that.
You do, we still do. Still doing that. But right around 3 or 4 is when I think, the movie really starts, and you start having memories, and you start kind of having awakening, if you will. And I think around 4 years old, I had some things that I knew, not cerebrally, but I knew them in my knowing. I knew that there was a God who loved me. I knew that I was going to be an actor, not that I wanted to be, although I also wanted to be an actor, but I knew, and I didn't understand what a lot of these terms meant, but I knew them, again, in my knowing. I knew that I was supposed to build and foster communities my whole life. I just knew these things. So anyway, then I was always a ham of an actor, a ham of a kid. I was always, doing impersonations and, singing and dancing and, found theater early on and then did lots and lots and lots of theater. And then around 18 years old, I was discovered doing a play in Ojai, California. I grew up in Ventura, California, near Ojai. And this woman saw me in it and she was like, "You've got it, kid. I want to help you." And I was like, "Great, I could use all the help I can get." And she got me to a manager who got me to a casting director who got me to one of the top agencies in Hollywood. And then at 19, I was auditioning for anything and everything under the sun. And then over the last 25 years, I'm 44 now, I've just slowly, it's a great age. Yeah, I'm very, very happy about it.
It's when we start getting a little bit gray.
Yeah, oh, no, I started getting this far before 44. It's just really starting to come into its own. Very Reed Richards at this point.
Very Doctor Strange, yeah.
Exactly, Doctor Strange. Great Marvel characters, both of them. So over the last 25 years, just building that career, God opening the doors that no man can shut and shutting the doors that no man can open all along the way, which is my prayer always anyway. And then that's led into, like Shazam, as we were talking about the book that I wrote, Radical Love. I talk about this in the book, and I've talked about it publicly a lot in podcasts, but that role really came out of me having a complete mental breakdown, going to therapy, saving my life, and in the midst of all of that, I had already passed on auditioning for the role of Shazam months prior, and then all of a sudden I'm now presented with auditioning for this other supporting role, and I had kind of found a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I was still at therapy, and I was like, all right, I'll go, By the way, I just found that video recently. I was looking back through my photos, and I was like, oh my God, there's that video that I sent in.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it was crazy. But then, long story short, a week later, I'm now Shazam. I'm a superhero. I had been killed in the Marvel Universe and the Thor franchise, and now I'm reborn in another, in the DC Universe. And not only that, but I'm playing a dream role. I mean, I was a massive fan of Christopher Reeve's Superman and Tom Hanks' Big, and I got to do both in one movie, basically.
That's a cool
Yeah,
analogy.
and also I
got
got to fight sin. I mean, literally, I fought the 7 deadly sins in the first movie, which was...
And you know what was really nice about it? I got to watch it with my kids. I didn't have
Yes.
to stress about it. I
Yes.
really liked that.
Yeah. Other than like the boardroom scene where the sin that gets a little harrowing. But listen, I mean, but it is by and large it's a movie that the whole family can watch. And Chuck was a show that the whole family can watch. And Tangled is a movie that the whole family can watch. And God has continued to kind of give me these wonderful projects that I do think, like, when you talk about, how Chuck was kind of a healing thing for you during your time. I have heard that from so many people, and I
think it's you. It's your personality. It's your bubbliness. It's like, oh, I wish I could be like that.
Well, it's the relatability too.
Well,
it's just
I
like-
appreciate that, but I would
Does
say
that make sense?
100%. But I would say that it's God, and I got to be and continue to try to be a conduit of God's light, life, and love. An instrument of His will, an extension of His grace. And I fail at it all the time, as we all do, because we're humans and we're fallible. But when I go and work on a project, particularly a project like that where I was barely acting, I mean, I was really just showing up and being myself most of the time, right? But also, it wasn't just me. God handpicked every single person in that cast and everyone in that crew. And we had a really amazing family. And, we struggled and we fought together in the trenches to make that thing a reality. And we gave our heart and soul to it and blood, sweat, and tears to it. And, you never know how God's going to use something that you're involved in. You don't.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Because I wasn't, sorry.
Oh, no.
In your book, Radical Love and everything, you talked about how you lost your faith. You lost your God.
Yeah.
And you had a hard time. How did you find it? Why is it important to you, and how did it help your health?
How did I find it again? Mm-hmm. Well,
because obviously you've mentioned God several times today, and I love that.
Yeah.
I love that about you.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have faith too. It's just where did this come from?
Well, listen, I mean, I grew up in a kind of a non-denominational, spirit-filled, born-again Christian family home situation. Though very atypical, because my mom and dad met in church in the 70s, had me and my sisters. They divorced or separated at least when I was about 6. We grew up with my mom, not my dad. My dad was the much more kind of religious or liturgic, like went to church every Sunday and Wednesday, taught Bible study for Sunday school, sang in the worship band. Like, he was very involved in his church. He lived in North Carolina for many years. My mom and stepdad, who ultimately came into our lives, were very anti-authority, and we never went to church. Like, literally never went to church. But they would have dinner parties and friends over, and drinking wine and talking about spirituality and Jesus and speaking in tongues and praying over each other. So I was really exposed to the more mystical, spiritual side of Christianity a lot growing up, and then ended up going to youth group in high school, and then But I was kind of like in and out of that. Like I wasn't sure. And then after high school, like when I graduated, I was like, I don't want to just believe these things because my parents believe them. I need to go on a journey and figure these out for myself. And so I started attending church by myself and found an amazing church in Ventura called The Bridge, and I was a part of that community for many years. And to me, the reason why they were amazing was because it really was about the community. The church, unfortunately, we constantly define as this building or cathedral or whatever that is. Like I go to a place that is the church, and that is just not simply true at all. The church is the people where two or more are gathered. That is church. That is what you are doing, right? And so that was a great thing that I found in that community. And then I've journeyed from that point. I mean, I was 18 at that point, right around the time that my career was starting to, like I was starting to audition and do these things. But over these now, 25 years, as with most of our spiritual journeys, if you're truly searching, if you're not willing to just take a lot of what is being fed to you, by the way, albeit by some amazing people and pastors or priests or whomever, right? Like, this is not an indictment of them or their character as much as I think that there's a lot within religion that unfortunately gets handed down, right, from whoever you get it from, your parents, your pastor, whatever, and you don't, often, most people, I think, they don't go, hang on, you're handing me this thing, and I see what you're handing me, but I have a couple questions about this. This doesn't track with me. Normally we go, okay, great, and we take that in, and then we hand it down, and so on and so forth, and there's never really question about it, and I think it's very important that we do. I think God welcomes that. I think God wants that. I don't think God has this ego where it's like, I can't believe that they would have a question about it. And it's like, guys, these manuscripts are, I was literally just listening to a podcast on the way here about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I mean, thousands of years old and lots of, not inconsistencies, but there's a lot of things that go on in all of these manuscripts, and I think it's worthy of us being able to unpack those things. At any rate, life was a journey, continues to be a journey, roller coaster in so many different ways. And for me to find myself in a place that I was just consumed in darkness, and it wasn't the first time. I think my clinical depression actually started when this, Southern California kid was moved up to the Pacific Northwest, and I talk about that in the book, and it was the most, I didn't have friends, I was bullied. I had some friends, but I was bullied by a lot of the kids that I was going to school with. The sun doesn't shine there.
No, the landscape alone is depressing.
It's you get a lot of just like rain and dreariness and stuff, and so there was a lot of depression that kind of started there, and a lot of undiagnosed. Like I've been ADHD since I was a young kid. I'm grateful that my mom never put me on Ritalin back then, because I don't think that that's good for young kids. I think that you need to allow kids to really, particularly young boys with all the energy. Like I love that there's more and more kind of alternative educational schoolings and things where they recognize this. Like, let the boys, let's go teach them in the field. Let's go learn about geology by picking up rocks and stuff like that.
Find where their strength is instead of making them fit a mold.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So, but I found a lot of my kind of outlet was in entertainment, is in the arts. I was able to kind of focus my ADHD and really go after this calling that I felt was on my life. Yeah. But going to this therapy, falling apart, being lost in this darkness, and probably the deepest level of it. And the lots of details of ultimately what brought me there, I talk about in the book. And a lot of that was biochemical, like literally my dopamine levels being totally out of whack for myriad reasons. But in all of that, to not feel like, because I was crying out to God for months, and I didn't feel like, and I had heard from God before in my life. Not in that audible sense. I don't know, maybe people hear in the audible sense, but it's just as good as audible. You hear it in your soul. You hear those words in you. And so I knew what it meant to hear from my Creator. And for months I was not hearing anything, and I was dying, and I wanted to die. And so that really makes you kind of second guess everything, and I did, but I think that's what needed to happen. I think that I needed to really let go of a lot of preconceptions of who I thought or what I thought God was, and then coming out of that, Shazam happening. I don't chalk that up to coincidence. I don't think that was just like, I did this thing and then that thing randomly happened. Like all of those things are very holistic and interconnected. And so that was even a part of me being like, all right, God is still very much working in my life. And even this darkness that I went through was him working in my life, because we can either allow it to be a crippling, I'm a victim for the rest of my life, or it can be redeemed. The traumas and the darkness that we experience in our lives can be and will be redeemed should we want to trust God with that and seek the lesson that we can seek in everything. You only lose if you lose the lesson. And so going through that and then continuing to just ask more questions and want to get deeper and allow myself to let go of, again, these preconceptions that I have of God, that brought me back to faith. I don't know that my faith is one that one would describe as like a traditional, non-denominational, spirit-filled Christianity in the same way that it used to be. Because I have, at this point, I think some very different ideas about all of that stuff, but I call myself kind of Christian adjacent at this point. In fact, I've been planning on doing a podcast called Christian Adjacent, because I just think that there's so much to talk about and explore, particularly if you're willing to acknowledge that, we don't know everything. We just don't.
Did you ever take a world religion class in college?
I did, as a matter of fact.
It was my favorite class ever. I actually told Logan and a couple other guys, I'm like, let's start a world religion YouTube channel.
Yeah. I mean, I remember learning about Zoroastrianism for the first time, and I was like, what is this? And realizing that it predated Christianity and had a lot of very similar themes.
Everything is so similar.
Very similar.
Everything.
Yeah, very similar.
Or there's even like the funny side of it, like the Pastafarians, how like, I don't know if you've ever heard that one.
Pastafarians?
Pastafarians. It started
like Rastafarians that love pasta?
Like they worship they worship a flying spaghetti monster, and it started as a joke.
Up.
It started as a joke, but now there's actually like a community that like does good, and they literally have these little stickers that say like flying spaghetti monster, and there's some people that actually do believe it, but it's like the same thing of like there is so many different facets to so many different things that I think when it comes down to it, it comes down to
I am hungry.
Yeah, well, that does make me hungry. Yeah, but it just comes, like you said, it's like there's so much adjacent to like the the regular known paths, not just religion, but in a lot of things.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to go back to that you said,
bring it.
Was you talked about how things are connected and it's not by coincidence. Mm-hmm. And one of the connections that I really wanted to make was, one, being a big fan of the Shazam movies, and then reading through your book, which I have to admit, as a guy with ADHD and bipolar and things like that, I'm a book listener. Like I don't have the attention span to read as good as the book is.
Sure.
And I love that you narrated your own book.
Yeah.
So then there's the emotion behind all of that. I couldn't help but notice the connection between Billy Batson and his home life and upbringing and yours. And his connection with the parental figures or the lack thereof. And hopefully that's not too much of a deep subject.
No, not at all.
But I'm like,
no.
Since watching Shazam and rewatching Shazam and then reading the book, I'm like, oh my gosh, like there is actually a lot of real life crossover.
Oh yeah.
Well, Billy Batson is, he's in and out of foster care.
Yeah.
But just the connection between him and Rosa at the end of the second one where he finally calls her mom, I'm like, dude, I got choked up with that.
Yeah.
So how is that playing that role, but also probably feeling that, probably on deep on the inside, kind of being able to like, did you connect with Billy a little bit?
Of course, yeah. I mean, like you said, I mean, I technically he was an orphan who was in and out of foster care, and I was not that. But to know that God brings family into your life that is not your blood. But oftentimes ends up becoming much thicker than the blood in your familial line, which is not to say that I have a very good relationship with my sisters and their families and my cousin and my uncles and so we're good, but we dealt with a lot of trauma, a lot of psychological abuse, as we were growing up, but God still provided throughout my life. Particularly so many women that were like these surrogate foster moms, essentially, So I was never technically orphaned or in foster care, but my relationship to my mom may as well have been kind of an orphaned relationship because we didn't have one. I did not have a solid, healthy, loving relationship with my mother most of my life. But God was good through all of that. And I would constantly have these people that were, either father figures or mother figures or whatever that saw me, saw my heart, loved me, cared about me. In the book, Beth, who I call Beth in the book, who's this real and angel of a human being, she was one in a long line of those women who loved me and prayed me back to life, So grateful for her. I'm so grateful for everybody that God brought through my life, being this kind of spiritual orphan of sorts,
Well, that's the same kind of the connection of just not having the traditional, like picturesque mother, like everybody, every little boy probably would hope to, right?
Sure.
So I love listening to your book because I love the emotion behind it, right? And I love the fact that you share all this stuff because we're big proponents of male vulnerability. Because being in the construction industry, he works as a private contractor for the Air Force. Like we're constantly surrounded by masculinity, and you don't talk about that. You shove it down or whatever, and obviously that leads to the male suicide rate that we have. Yeah. And you were almost part of that statistic. I was almost part of that statistic. Tyson's talked about his suicidal ideation at times, and then we all talk about, oh, this saved me, that saved me. So what is it? If you could say something that could help. I don't know, maybe normalize or help just continuing the battle of ending the stigma behind that. Like, because we view men speaking up and people speaking up in behalf of men as a higher form of masculinity and strength than just being too afraid to talk about it because it makes you look weak. So if you could speak to that at all, just the premise that you're weak if you speak.
Yeah, I mean, well, first I want to say that I'm actually quite proud of us collectively as a society that over the last 10 years,
it's gotten a lot better.
It's gotten so much better.
Yeah.
It's gotten so much better. And that's because there have been a lot of people that have platforms that have been willing to show their vulnerability, men and women both, who have been, whether that's, actors, celebrities, or sports, athletes, the Michael Phelpses of the world, or there have been quite a few now that have been willing to speak out, and in doing so, everyone else in the population benefits from that because really, as we all know, as people who have struggled with and will, by the way, continue to have bouts, is it's never. I like to say that mental health is like dental health. It's you have to consistently clean, floss, and brush your mind. Because if you don't, you get little cavities, and you don't attend to the cavities, and they become full-blown root canals, and that's ultimately what I had to go through in Connecticut.
That's a super good analogy.
Thanks.
Like I'm a big analogy guy.
Yeah.
So right?
No.
Go figure.
Yeah. But so so it's a process. It's a lifelong thing. You don't just get this I wish that we could just brush and floss one time and it's over and we're all good. Easy. But clearly that's not how it works. But so I think that we've done a good job. I think that, or even what's his name, that UFC fighter, Paddy something or other, that Irish. Yeah, so, Paddy Pimblett, as we just found out. He won this really great fight, and then he basically took all of his, victory speech to talk about his friend who had just tragically ended his own life, and he was like, in his Liverpool or it was either Manchester or Liverpool. I don't know if he was Scouse or not, but it's like, you got to talk, you got to talk about your feelings, you got to do it, And it was so wonderful because particularly it's one thing if like Michael Phelps, a swimmer, who was still a manly man, right? But and on top of the level of what swimming can be.
Now you're talking about a cage fighter.
But you're talking about a cage fighter talking about mental health and suicide and men talking, and these are pivotal moments. So I think we've actually done a pretty good job. Still more to do, but we've done a good job there.
That's and this is why. Yeah.
What's that?
That's a great perspective because I think we sometimes view things as though they still are the way they used to be, but there is quite a bit more push.
We're making progress, and that's actually why at Nerd HQ, which is the mental health nonprofit that I started and that my lovely friend Eric is helping me run. To me, after my mental health journey and recognizing that I got this great treatment, but that was only because I was blessed enough to have the finances to go and have such treatment, and that most people don't have anywhere near enough finances to go and get that kind of level of treatment. I just took it upon myself to be that if my life's mission is nothing else, that we destigmatize, but also we help people to afford what that is. So at Nerd HQ, that's literally what we do. We're just trying to transmute anything and everything, donations or cool auction items or whatever. It's like, great, take all that, make some money on that, put it into a big pool of money, and then anybody who can't afford therapy, which is a lot of people, can then at least have some opportunity for that. So I think that's part of it, right? It's one thing to help destigmatize it. That's great. But now you've got which used to be the barrier of entry, particularly for men, like, I don't want to talk about it. A lot of men are willing to now kind of start treading into that water, but they're like, but I'm literally hand to mouth right now. Like, I can barely put food on the table for me and mine and do whatever little bits of, I don't have another $250 to go and talk to a stranger for 45 minutes. So,
well, and that's the fact that you said that. I mean, that relates so much to me in my, 7 years ago, I disappeared and then finally was picked up, voluntarily by the police, and I found out I was bipolar, and I was in the middle of a manic episode.
Wow.
My beautiful wife, pregnant with our second child. I had a million things going for me. I was paycheck to paycheck, right, like every other one else in the the middle class, and I had to power through it because I didn't have the ability to go to a mental health facility.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to actually talk about Nerd HQ because that hits us in the heart, because that helps solve such a major problem, which is, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I just got to power through this. And unfortunately, some guys and some women can't power through it, and they end up, like you said, it's kind of succumbing to the darkness even more. And that, I love that, because that humanizes you and people in your in your spheres that much more. And it kind of goes back to what you're saying of like being a conduit or being a steward of everything that you've been given, is turning around and putting your money where your mouth is and being like, hey, what good can I do? What can I take that I've struggled with and help people who may not have had the same opportunities as me? So that to me is such, it puts you on, I've never been like a celebrity guy. My wife is like E-News. You ask her a question about any of them, she will tell you who they're married to, what date they got, all that stuff. But for me, I love when people have influence and they have power and they do good with it. So I love Nerd HQ. So
thanks, man.
News with Eric.
I mean, listen, if we've learned nothing else from Spider-Man, it's with great power comes great responsibility.
Gotta plug that.
And I think that all of the gifts that we're given, all of the blessings that we're given in our life are in fact powers. Yeah. Those are powers. Those are something that somebody else may not have or definitely doesn't have. And I think that with all of that comes with responsibility. And so I've known, really ever since I was a kid, there have been these things, these wisdoms that have been ingrained in me. And so I've always wanted to use my platform to try and do as much good in this world as I can, particularly if you are able to, blessed enough to survive walking through particular fires, then I think that you have a calling then on your life to bring back buckets of water for those who are still in the flames.
Dude.
And so I think that when it came to mental health, because that was my biggest, continues to be the thing that is the most defining struggle in my life, I guess you could say. It's not like, I'm going to go do a good thing. It's like, no, I have to.
Yeah, you feel like it's
there is no option in that as far as I'm concerned, because I don't know how I would be able to go and live the rest of my life and have a clear conscience and be happy going somewhere, knowing that like, oh man, I did and I got through that. Well, hope everybody else figures it out. We need more people that care.
Well, it's like you talk about in the book. It's almost like the Robin Williams effect, where somebody can be fighting something so dark, and that's why they like to spread so much joy if they have that ability, they have that talent, because they know what it feels like to be in just this total utter despair. And so,
so my daughter, going a little into it, she suffers from eating disorder, and she almost passed away several times. And it got to the point where we had to go to a certain location in Utah, and she had to get help. And she had a lot of therapists there, and one of the dietitians there taught her a lot of stuff. But what's funny is you think about eating disorders, you think it's about the food. It's not. It's about
body image.
Yeah, it's about
your self-worth.
Self-worth is a huge thing, and so I didn't know that. And so anyway, we're sitting here talking, and she is starting to. She was there for 5 months, 6 months, and now she's back. She's doing so much better. But now she's like, I'm going to school and becoming a dietitian, and I want to go help people there. Yeah. And so it's just, when you said that, I'm like, oh yeah, she feels the calling now because she got help. She wants to go help others.
Exactly, and that is yet another example of how God, takes lemons and makes lemonade. I mean, it's like that had she never gone through what she went through, which is not to say that God couldn't have her on another journey. I think God has an infinite amount of ways that he could take us in our lives, right? We're also concerned with, is this the exact right way? And I think God's like, just walk, just go. Like I can't steer a parked car. So drive, and then trust me to steer you in the directions of your heart, things that I put on your heart, on your mind, passions, desires, dreams, visions. And also, by the way, sometimes you pick up something else, you're like, oh, wow, look at that thing. And God's like, cool, you want to go that way? Let's go that way. Just keep trusting me. And so I think for your daughter, she's been given this really cool opportunity to not just have learned and grown so much through the process that she's gone through and will continue to, but that's led her into this passion for wanting to help people that are struggling through the same things and more, right? A dietitian gets to do a lot more than just that. Yeah. I think that's wonderful. And really quick, just to kind of tie a bow on your previous question of, how to get men specifically to not feel like speaking that speaking is weak. I think that what we're dealing with right now is that we have evolved as a society rapidly, and we used to be not too long ago much closer to our hunter-gatherer ancestors. We did not have all this social media and technology and everything. Like we men predominantly were out doing physical labor and quite a lot of physical labor in order to provide for our family and our significant others, wives and whatnot. Will be at home putting a lot of labor into maybe not as physical but emotional labor and intentionality into the family unit, into the community. And not constantly distracted by and also being chipped away at in this, constant comparison. Comparison is the thief of joy. Every time you pull over in your phone, you're looking at somebody's life that seems a million times better than yours. When we were in a village, we were all, look at the Amish.
We're all in the same.
The Amish are like, it's funny that for so long people wanted to make fun of the Amish, like, oh, they don't even have technology. Look at them in their horse and buggies, and look at their health, their physical health, their spiritual health, their mental health. Which is not to say that they don't have some issues, but those people know each other, trust each other, aren't sitting around constantly being like, oh my God, did you see what Abraham posted on Instagram? No.
Well, those guys can whip out a barn in a day.
Exactly. And I will tell you though, and I do believe this to be true, when we as men used to be using our bodies to, by the way, not even just to work laboriously, but also, like fighting and all of the things that came with that, the body, I'm sure you've heard this term, the body keeps the score. Our body retains a lot of our emotional and mental imbalance if we don't exercise it out of us, which is why exercise is such a massive part of our mental health, right? Diet, good sleep, good diet, and good exercise. You do those three things, it will handle most of mental illness. Not all of mental illness. There's still biological and biochemistry things, as you know and as I know, that affect us. But those things are lost arts in a lot of ways. And so as men particularly, we don't have these same ways of physically exercising this out. So that's number one, I would say. Like if you're not moving, if you're sitting on your couch and constantly inundated with blue light and playing video games or watching movies or sitting on your computer, you're going to be depressed. It doesn't matter what you do, you're still going to be struggling with some, like, what am I doing with my life? I don't feel like the man that I want to be, whatever. But beyond that, every great man that's ever walked this earth cried. Every one of them.
Oh, yeah.
The greatest warriors mourned their fellow fallen compatriots, mourned the loss of their child. There's nothing wrong with crying. Crying is one of the, and this is easy for me to say, I guess, because I've always been in touch with my emotions and been an actor and whatever. Same. But man, talk about the catharsis. Talk about the crying is how we exercise a lot of these pent up emotions. And if you're constantly thinking like, oh, I can't do that, then it's just going to fester inside of you. So, any guy, if you're a man out there and there's other men around you that want to judge you because they see you having some kind of emotion come through, those are not men that you want to be around. You only want to be around people, men and women, who recognize that we are all not just that it's okay that we share our vulnerability and our emotions, but it is good, it is necessary. We have got to be able to do that.
I love that. We could wrap up right there because the point is we have a friend that has a foundation his whole thing is it's not weak to speak.
No.
That the more you speak up, the more you find those that you can relate to, the more solidarity, and the same thing of like I have created such tighter bonds with other men by just connecting. Like we're a part of a group that's called Connect and Conquer, and kind of going back to what you were saying of just they say that ADHD is actually this like primal hunter-gatherer like character trait, and I'm like, man, I need to get out and go, like take down some buffalo or something then because I'm a little wired at the moment.
Yeah.
But I love your whole take on all this because it's actually the struggles that bring you closer together to people. But people feel like when that struggle happens, you get reclusive and you go to the darkness and then you go to what feels more comfortable. You go to watching Chuck, even though it makes you feel good. Getting out and wanting to just like connect with people and it just. The expression is what I found is the most healing when it comes to the depression, like getting out and talking about it and getting in connected with other people.
Yeah, and not falling into the trap of wallowing or ruminating.
Yeah,
which is
like
very
complaining
easy
all the time.
to do.
Yeah,
even when you don't have other people that are like kind of fostering that in you, it's very easy for us to not want to get out of that because we still don't feel that it's healed, and that's true. It might not be healed, but. Our plasticity, our kind of brain plasticity, works in such a way that the more you ruminate on something, the deeper that groove becomes, and therefore the more you are capable of falling into the trap of then thinking about it again. It's almost like like sleds on a freshly snowed on hill. You take that sled down and you create tracks, and you take it down again, you create some more tracks and some more. Well, eventually. All those tracks are kind of leading into one larger track. And so if you want to go take your sled on a whole other track, you can't because it's all going to lead back into that. Very similar, which is also part of the reason why there's a lot of really very promising studies when it comes to things like psilocybin and even LSD and MDMA that are showing, soldiers coming back from war, having killed people and watching their fellow soldiers die in front of them, massive PTSD.
I have a neighbor who was a Navy SEAL that had that.
Oh yeah. And they're finding that you could go do talk therapy and hopefully you can get through your PTSD. It's never going to happen because you have to be willing to go to the place of re-engaging those memories, which are already things that you're literally your brain and body are saying, don't do, right? That's what makes it traumatic. And what psilocybin with MDMA, specifically that combination, is showing that you're able to go back to those times and love yourself and everyone in that moment as if it's happening right then, and you recognize that everyone's doing their best. I mean, that's ultimately, I think, that at the bottom of your daughter's struggles, your struggles, my struggles, really anything and everything under the umbrella of mental illness, you can root back to some form of not valuing, not loving, not appreciating yourself and the life that you have. And if you can get there first, then you can start building on that, because it's like, oh no, I all these bad things, or things that I think that I've screwed up in my life, which I was beating the crap out of myself about, for me to finally come to the realization that I was doing my best. And but guess what? If you can apply that to yourself, and you do, that means you have to apply it to everyone else, including all of your abusers, including my mom, like I talk about in the book. Like, I didn't want to let my mom off the hook. She abused me tremendously, but she didn't know she was. She was also herself abused, and she was a product of her environment. And then I'm a product of my environment, and you're products of your environment, and your daughter's a product of her environment. And her environment, by the way, with, again, social media and every other girl at school, and oh my God, I don't fit this.
It's 100%.
I mean, it's, so we have to be able to forgive that.
Did you know that women specifically, like, they target women? There was a whistleblower that came out, and it says, hey, Facebook is going after these women and their insecurities. And when that happens, they're on their phone at least one time every hour. Even when they wake up at night, they'll go check their phone and then go back to sleep. And it's like, it's miserable.
Well, they're targeting everybody, but I mean, they're targeting us all in different ways. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've seen The Social Dilemma, but it's a great documentary. And I mean, that was kind of an initial whistleblow, but there's so much more that keeps coming out. And
that's where it sometimes feels overwhelming, because like we try to put out like the good stuff on social media, right? Like with, Dad Bods and Beards and, personal social medias and stuff that we do, we try to put out the relatable mental health, empathetic stuff. And I feel like I'm getting this from you too, I feel like anybody I've met who's gone through the mental health battles, it's almost kind of like you're like like forced to be empathetic because like you know how it is, and it's like even in your own struggles, you're like, I know how that feels, and I don't want you to feel like that. And you're like, I don't know if I have the bandwidth, but I can't leave you like this. Like I need to help you. I need to help this person because you're like, I don't want you to ever go there again. It may be inevitable, but if I can be that person, I mean, I feel like you probably can relate to this too. Like when you got that one friend that calls you and you kind of maybe like staring at the phone of like, this is always a hard conversation when I talk to this person, but I feel like this responsibility that like I have to answer the phone for this person because I want to, and I'm the person that they need in this moment. So I love how relatable this conversation is because sometimes people in Hollywood, you seem so unattainable and you seem very
well. Listen,
like,
I mean,
off.
but everybody's on their own journey. I mean, when I'm at conventions, I'll often have people come up to me. I try to make the most welcoming, loving. I bring out like my speaker, play music, and I love people. I've always loved people since I was a kid. I literally believe that it's one of the biggest reasons God put me on this earth was to go and really genuinely help to love other human beings and teach them to love themselves and continue to encourage that type of energy. And so that's pretty evident when people come to my table at a convention. Oftentimes they will say, thank you for being so kind because so-and-so, we went to their table and they were so cold and this, that, and the other. And I tell them every single time, I go, recognize that everyone is on their own journey. And you don't know what they're going. They could have just been that day. They could have been having a horrible day. They could be having a horrible month. They could be having a horrible year. That could just be who they are pretty much all the time. But why are they that way all the time? Because of how they grew up, how they were programmed, whatever it is, which doesn't excuse cold and callous behavior, but we ought not to go to places of like, ew, because then we're just a part of the same problem, right? The more we want to look at anyone who's doing wrong, whatever that, by the way, and that becomes very gray because lots of different people have very different ideas of what is holy and what is not holy. I use it as an example, because I think using extremes is often very helpful because everything falls within the spectrum below that. But most people in the West, at the very least, but I would say most people even around the world, would look at someone who's a suicide bomber who straps explosives to their body, walks into a public market and kills dozens, if not hundreds of civilians. You would go, the easy thing to do is monster, evil. Now listen, what they did is monstrous and is evil.
Yeah.
But that human being, in that moment, fully believed that they were doing the most holy act that they could do. It wasn't Machiavelli twisting their mustache, I can't wait to go do this evil. It's like they're terrified out of their minds and like, I'm gonna be in heaven with 79 I don't know how many virgins
it's
they get.
It's more terrifying to them to not do it.
Exactly, but it's because since they were a child, they've been programmed to do that. So we have got to be willing to recognize that about literally everyone. But I will say though that when it comes to empathy, because it's something that I've had a deep amount of my whole life, and it has hijacked my life because I have felt this.
That's a good way to say it.
Because I've felt like I have to be there for everybody. You don't have to be there for everybody. Okay. You don't. Empathy, unchecked empathy, is not actually a beneficial thing. Because in the same way that you, like on the plane when the masks drop, you got to put your mask on before you help anybody else with their mask. And oftentimes when we have unchecked empathy, we're running around trying to help everybody else with their mask and we're slowly suffocating to death. And so, yes, there's going to be people that are a little bit more of a labored investment in trying to be there for them, right? But know that God is bigger than all of that. So if you're in a place, anyone is in a place, and you're like, I feel like I have to, but also like that's going to really take from me so much that I don't know that I can afford that right now, then you don't owe that person that time.
Yeah, that's
good
advice.
You don't. And we have to be able to trust that God is bigger than all of it. And if that person doesn't get you in that moment, then they might get somebody else in that moment. And sometimes, by the way, they're not supposed to get anybody in that moment because they've got to sit with themselves and they have to unpack some stuff. And the more we go and we talk to other people, a lot of people, that's just what they do. They think they're doing the work because they're going and leaning on every one of their friends and family members and telling the same sob story. And their friends and family go, oh, I love you, and da-da-da-da-da. And they don't ever get really held to account for the things that they should be doing in their lives.
The enablement.
And that's what another thing I would say is when you do feel compelled to go talk to that friend, to love is to will the good of the other. It's one of the best definitions I've ever heard of love. It does not mean you have to like them. It doesn't mean you have to like what they're doing. It doesn't mean that you have to just, drop all of your boundaries with this person. No. You can hold every single boundary still. And when that person is in need and overly needy of whatever your time, energy, time, treasure, and resources, whatever, you have every right to say, I'm here for you to help in whatever ways I think are beneficial for you, and in ways that I actually don't think are not beneficial for you, I'm not going to be able to help you in that way. So you can kick and scream and be upset with me because I don't pick up the phone every time you want me to, or because I'm not willing to give you this loan because you've run out of money again, or whatever it is, So I think it's important that we have empathy, deep empathy, but you have to balance that with logic. And this is part of the problem, I think, in the world, is that you have a lot of super deeply empathetic human beings. I think this election in the United States was actually a really good example of this. Typically, in my opinion, people that fall into being Democratic voters tend to have a lot of empathy. They want, it's like where a lot of socialism comes from and a lot of ultimately communism. It's like, everybody, we need to help everybody. Everybody should have the same amount of bread and the same amount of gas and the same amount. It's like, so you go, okay, but run that down now logically. And where does that lead you? How do you do that? How do you do that without end up being something like communist Russia or China, where all of your rights and everything are taken away? And by the way, things that are responsible for the deaths of literally hundreds of millions of people, right? So if you have unchecked empathy, then it's not ultimately helping you, and I don't think it's going to help them either.
Oh, that's a good take. I like that.
Switching gears for just the last thing, you have an unbelievable quote. That I'm going to read to you, your own quote.
Bring it.
But we have a lot of followers who will reach out to us and DM us and email us, and they are suffering. They're suffering in silence, and they feel like they're part of this conversation right now, listening to it. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that we have that platform where they can feel connection, but they're suffering. And they can't forgive themselves, and they can't get over maybe something they've done or something that's happened to them. It's just like it seems like they're in they're very hostile towards themselves. So I'm going to read this, then ask you how.
Okay.
So this is in Radical Love, and it's on page 7. The road is better mental health is a long and difficult one. You will stumble and fall. You will slip up 1,000 little ways daily. You will fall backward into old destructive patterns again, and again. And if you treat every one of those setbacks as a personal failure, you will never make it. The only way forward is to get back up, dust yourselves off, and move forward again. The only way to do that, only way to do that is to accept yourself as less than perfect. And the only way to do it is that you have to have grace. How do you give yourself grace?
Well, like we just talked about.
Yeah. That's what I mean. I felt like it was.
I think that some people are very good at applying that empathy to strangers, but not to themselves. Wow, some people are the opposite. Although I don't find that to be normally the case. Typically, people who are able to give themselves empathy and recognize that they were doing their best, if we can resonate something in us, that becomes a truth in the way that we see the rest of the world most of the time. But most people struggle with, because it's really easy. If you look at somebody else and you don't know all the details of their life and you don't know their thoughts and you don't know their reason, all the things that you know about yourself, right? And you just see this person and they've done this thing, but you go, you want to be, not everybody, but a lot of us want to be the bigger, better person and go, well, they're a product of their environment. Mm-hmm. We are all products of our environment. You have got to be willing to recognize that you are doing the best that you can with the tools and the training that you have in that moment and that moment only. How could you possibly be upset with yourself? I mean, and again, these are logical things that are difficult to wrap your head around if you're stuck in depression and anxiety. This is unfortunate, right? The most sinister thing about depression and anxiety is that it clouds your ability to see reality. But in reality, here's the reality to all your viewers and listeners back at home. You are doing the best you can with the training and the tools that you have right now. And so if you have not done everything that you think you should have done or could have done up to that point, you've got to have grace with yourself. You've got to say, okay, but I didn't know better. And now Maybe I do know better, at least about this thing or that thing or a few things or whatever. So now go step forward, living a better life with what you know now, and allow that to start to manifest learning more things and making better decisions and learning more things and making even better decisions. So listen, at the end of the day, though, that having that grace, I think, still requires first and foremost recognizing that you are a child of God. You are a child. I believe every one of us, regardless of what they do or don't believe per any, let's say, scripture or manuscript or whatever, I believe that God Almighty, Yahweh, sees all of us as his children. And I believe that if you can own that and recognize that God in that loves you, you are an extension of God's love. We are extensions of God's energy and love, whether we like it or not, whether we recognize it or not. Whether we even be, we get to work on ourselves to be better versions of that. Some people don't, and so they're not good conduits of God's love, I don't think, which is unfortunate. But we are instilled with God's love, and I think that you have to start there to recognize that you are worthy of that love. You are worthy of that grace. You are worthy of that forgiveness to apply to yourself. And then when you start doing that, that's when you really start to see things change for the better.
I love that. I totally believe all of that. I feel that to my core. How is someone able to get a hold of Nerd HQ first to donate or participate?
Nerdhq.org, www.nerdhq.org, and we have our website's up now. We're about to have a newer version of that website come up, but regardless, new website or existing website. There's links to donate. There's links to see what we're about to launch, which is essentially our first 400 people that we can get into free therapy. We're about to be able to bless with, which is incredible. I'm so excited about. We have merchandise, which we call Nurchandise.
I like that. That's cool.
Nurch. You can support us by buying Nurch as well. We're hopefully going to have some more of that come back to the site. But also, what I'm trying to do is also build online communities. I miss the beginnings of the internet when you could go to like chat rooms and you could like talk to people, like there was an actual community that could be built there. And so back in the day, I did a lot of Nerd HQ events down at San Diego Comic-Con. And the idea is still to have those so we can bring the online community into an actual physical community, because that's a massive part of, and also the community that we built. I mean, to this day, there are people that are Nerd H crewers, as we call them, and they are family. They literally found each other either attending or volunteering at Nerd HQ, and they have literally become that family that is thicker than blood. So there's a lot of different ways that one can interact with Nerd HQ. Hopefully, like I said, there'll be events down the road, but right now online, there's lots of ways you can.
And if you ever need us, we'll do whatever we can, Eric. And
we get
Zach.
We get to be a part of the Nerd HQ Giving Tuesday coming up. We made a promo video. We're super excited to be a part of that. We got some Nerd HQ gear already.
Love it.
So we're definitely investing in that. As we're kind of wrapping up here, I don't feel like there's any more bigger nuggets you could have shared of just wisdom. You've already dropped a ton. One of the things that we like to do is we always like to leave listeners with like a little challenge, and a lot of it is like giving yourself grace, things like we've said that a ton. So I loved hearing that from you. Not to kind of put you on the spot, so maybe while you're thinking about that, you've talked a lot about God, and me and myself personally, not to get too deep, I was raised.
Get deep, man.
Yeah,
Get deep.
I was raised very staunch in one religion. And through my mental health struggles, being extremely bipolar, hallucinating, almost trashing and literally ending my own life, got very angry with my perception of God, and then left. And through this, I did some breathwork sessions and opening myself up to new ways of therapy. Yeah. And I related so much to a lot of what you were saying, because in my most recent one, I felt more connected to God than I ever did in my entire life. Yeah. As an almost 35-year-old man, finally having this moment of being like, why? Why did I go through this? Why did I ruin and traumatize so many people in my life? Why did I almost, ruin my marriage? All of these things. And the feeling, this overwhelming feeling I kept having was, I had to break you so I could build you, because of some of the influence you now have, and now feeling more of like that's a blessing to have that influence, to be a blessing to have been able to be broken to the point now of like having that empathy and understanding the importance of self-grace and positive self-talk versus negative self-talk. So with everything we've talked about, Nerd HQ, Radical Love, and just your experience with mental health and just your career in general, if there was a quick wrap up of a challenge or something you could leave with people, because we have a lot of men that listen, we also have a lot of women that listen, are getting insights to men's mental health. What's this last little nugget you could leave us with?
There's so many important things that we could talk about and things that I am very passionate about. But I would say that...
we can fly out again and do it again.
Yeah.
No, I'm just serious.
Or next time up in Salt Lake.
Yeah.
But listen, I would say this. I start my prayers every day in acknowledging my Creator and asking that He would help me to approach Him and walk always in humility, gratitude, and trust. And I think that those three things, which is not to say that there's not a lot of offshoots of those things and lots of other, descriptive words that can talk about what it means to have a relationship with your Creator and walk with your Creator and be the best vessel that you can be. But I think that those three cover it in a way that most everything else is kind of encompassed in. And so my encouragement, or my whatever this might mean to anybody, if you're having a hard time figuring out, like, well, what do I need to do in my life? What changes do I need to make in my life? I'm sure there could be a list of things if you get into the minutia. But if you really, I have found, if you really want to try to get into that focus and that vibe, if you are humble to your Creator, you are grateful to your Creator, and you trust your Creator, and those are the things that you try to just focus on, lots of other things start to fall into place beyond that.
How would you show gratitude?
I mean, to me...
Sorry, I know...
No, not at all. No, I think these are all valid questions. I think that gratitude is quite literally, anytime that we're looking at our life and we're like, I wish this was different. We might, in some ways, you think, well, you need that, right? Because in order to go live a bigger, better life, accomplish other things, whatever, you can't be fully satisfied with what you have in that moment, obviously. If you were fully satisfied, maybe you would never have the fire to go and do something bigger or better or whatever. But it's a balance of not being satisfied, or rather being satisfied, but knowing that there's more adventure. And in this, it's not to be complacent, but to truly just be grateful. And, I think it's important, because a lot of people, they get lost in this, it's almost like the I don't even know what you would call it, but, when somebody, let's say, starts talking, me as an actor, for example, if I start talking about how it was hard shooting this particular project and the hours were so long, and then of course there's always someone who wants to be like, oh, famous actor guy's got a problem. What about all the people starving? It's like, I'm not saying that those aren't real issues that need to be addressed. And by the way, that might even be far more life altering for that person if it's literally they don't have food and water, right? But you cannot just dismiss anyone's complications in their life, right? So it's not a matter of being being grateful doesn't have to mean well, I've got water and those people don't have water, and then sitting in this negative energy. It's no, I have water. I have food, I have family and friends, I have my limbs. I mean, by the way, that's one of the things that constantly brings me back. Anytime I am just feeling, I'll try to remind myself of even if I had nothing, but I have literally 2 legs and 2 arms and all my digits, and I don't have any physical, the amount of people, you want a lesson in gratitude.
Yeah.
Go look at the videos of the people that are literally born with no arms, and they're driving their cars with their feet, and they're feeding themselves with their feet.
Well, Logan does that anyway.
Yeah. So I think that's, to me, it doesn't have to always be about comparison, but just looking at your life and taking inventory of your life and being grateful for what you do have. And when you can be grateful for what you do have, then it's amazing how that can open up a frequency in your life where now God's like, oh, cool. because I know that you have been faithful in little, now I might be able to bless you with much or more than whatever this was, But if we're not faithful, I don't believe that God sees us as being faithful with what we have if we're not willing to look at what we have and be like, thank you so much. Thank you that if nothing else, I have this,
Wow.
Logan and I, so when Lydia, my wonderful daughter, like we're best friends now, when she came home, she brought to us an unbelievable idea that we've implemented immediately. We do lunch or dinner, no matter what, electronics are gone. No phone, no TV, Good. No nothing. We sit around the table and we do high, lows, and gratitudes. Yeah. So what's high today? What was your low today, and what are you grateful for? And I've learned that our kids are starting to feel. That's the best way to put it. Like they're more willing to share, to be more descriptive, and actually tell us their problems. And also, their life isn't bad. So what's going on? What are you grateful for? And Logan has implemented it, and it really does change our life. And that's why I asked about the gratitude.
No, absolutely. No. I think it's important. But I would also add just really quickly, because I know we're trying to wrap up here, but. They've done studies. They've done studies, and what's really fascinating about gratitude is that it really is a superpower. Like it very much changes your entire kind of biochemistry. Like literally, your cells, like everything. Like it's amazing. But what's even more fascinating to me is that the most powerful gratitude practices are actually less. Our own, let's say, personal, like I've got a gratitude journal, or you say you're grateful. That's all important. But what they found was when someone is watching someone else be grateful, that actually changes it. Even like there's even more of a dynamic shift. And I think that there's something that's really beautiful in this, because what it should tell us is surround yourself with people who not only want to go bless other people, but then you get to witness the blessing and then have a higher probability of watching someone then be grateful for that blessing. This is one of the reasons why I think, community groups, church groups, particularly if they really are community-based, not like, hey, cool, see you next Sunday, but like, the church that I went to in Ventura, the Bridge, we would go down to the Avenue in Ventura, which was definitely the rundown, more, lower income part of Ventura, one of them, and do massive just cleanup. Like we just go to houses and be like, hey, can we help? Saw there's some trash here. Can we help get rid of that? Can we help do your laundry? Can we help do all of these things? And when you go and you're a part of that kind of thing, Habitat for Humanity, whatever, go on some medical mission, go do a thing. Watch how that changes your life, even if you're not the one that's being thanked. Just by watching other people express this deep gratitude, it's life-altering. So that's just another thing I think.
Dude, that's Lydia with HXP.
Yeah, we could sit here forever, and I can't for the both of us, express enough gratitude for the time taken, to do this. Because I was saying 8 months ago, we were a basement podcast, and I feel like when you have a good message and you have good intent and you are trying to do good, I mean, like you said, you're a steward and you're kind of the conduit of that light. And so thank you on behalf of all the guys everywhere that are struggling silently, and the women that are struggling silently or seeing their partners and things like that struggling. Thank you for using your light and your influence for good.
Always.
So it's been a pleasure.
Pleasure. Thanks, guys.